only people killed on January 6th were four demonstrators that day: Roseanne Boylan, Ashley Babbitt, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. A gentleman named Brian Sicknick, who honorably served in the U.S. military and later as Capitol Police officer, died of a stroke. That was the ruling of the coroner and Harvard medical expert Dr. Leroy Schwarm, I think his name was, who weighed in on this and said Mr. Sicknick died of a stroke the following day. Now, interestingly enough, as this Capitol Police officer was laid in state, the narrative carried out by the members of would-be select committee, Democrats and others, was that this individual was bludgeoned, beaten to death by the unruly mob that day by individuals who were Trump supporters. They said that we beat this man to death with a fire extinguisher. Then, when that didn't add up and people started asking questions, the narrative quickly changed to the fact that Mr. Sicknick was shot with bear spray from a protester and that someone had essentially murdered him with bear spray. It's on you, all of you, the American people, just as much as it's on me. But I've been doing my damn job. I've been fighting this for 4 years. I need to know where more of you are. You owe it, not to me, maybe not to them, but if you owe it to anyone, do you not owe it to future generations, your own bloodline, your own children? Do you think by duck and cover and say nothing and don't donate, don't get involved, stay low, that it's not going to come for you? We saw IRS, Lois Lerner and the Tea Party. We saw this event. What do you think it's going to take for the American public to actually say no more? It's your time. It's time now. You back and support Donald Trump. You back and support the legislators who are doing what you want. Get loud, get vocal, make them know you're behind them and make them know when you're against them. But you damn sure better be supporting United States veterans. You damn sure better supporting the people that stood up for you. And then I hear people sometimes say, oh, I want to pardon the violent ones. You know what? I want to find out who the 10 most violent are. Well, I actually know, but I want to put those people up front. I want to pardon them first. You know why? Because if shit hits the fan, they're the kind of men that are going to show up.
Mr. Evans, is there an account? How many nonviolent J6 protesters?
900.
There have been 900 that have been prosecuted.
Yes.
And how many?
Well, there's 900 nonviolent demonstrators.
Of how many are still behind bars or are? Does anyone have an idea?
It was 270 something at last count. There's some organizations do a much better job than me at keeping count of that. I'd have to ask them to be here for those specifics. Somewhere around 270. There you go, 276 currently.
And we know about the DC jail. Are there any other locations where they might be held?
Yes, I think that's a very important topic because prison reform needs to be addressed because we've now seen not only the diesel therapy issues that are going on, we're still asking why in this day and age, what is performed, what specific function is performed in Oklahoma that every single J6 defendant needs to go through Oklahoma, then go somewhere else once they're arrested, when they're removed. So that's a great question. But as far as there's facilities right now. There's individuals and facilities that have broken kitchens, non-functioning kitchens where they're shipping in food. And this has been going on for months due to fires. We've addressed some of these issues in some of the trials. Again, why I think there's meaningful conversations to be had about prison reform and what's happening in the Bureau of Prisons and these privatized prison systems and how there's massive failure to take care of people that do have rights.
Thank you.
I know you can't say anything. I'm going to jump to Mr. Evans.
Okay.
I'll sure
I'm going to let
say
him
it.
anecdotally share. And then my understanding is, like I said, the Quran is being provided. They might give you the Book of Mormon, but the Bible is taking as long as for some
Look,
it's 20 days. What do you know on this?
So listen, we released in this document. Contained in here is the re-education material that was provided to the January 6th defendants. And if you start reading through just the titles alone, you'll start to quiver. I did. Was very upset.
You mean this is systematic? They're trying to reprogram them while they're
This is the reprogramming information given to them on their tablet. Like once upon a time in prison, you would take a class on plumbing or an electrical or trade. You would do something or another language. They were actually given credit for taking classes on, may I share a couple of titles? taking classes on information such as, I'll tell you what, I'm going to say something else. With Kara, will you find that section there, please? So these were re-education materials distributed to them about Trump's big lie. Well, how the election here. Oh, here we go. Trump's crimes before he called for the attack on our democracy. Donald Trump, how he has attacked our democracy. Negligence, obstruction, rape, tax evasion. These are actual lesson plans. Take a look at the tablet, ask them to show you, that were available to them in the jail. In addition to this,
So they want to give you this, but the moral standards of the Bible, you're going to restrict that.
if we haven't noticed, there's been certainly, we want to promote one thing in religion and remove another. It's been a consistent method. In addition to that, one of the you mentioned standing human feces, and I'd like to point out Wanda Patton and Quincy Booth. So those two individuals have been cited by Judge Royce C. Lamberth back in 2021 for I believe one resigned and the other stepped down, or the other one was fired, in my understanding. But they were cited for civil rights abuses. Denial of medical treatment and care was happening in the jail on their watch in a case, and that came back. But this is the problem. The actual, can you hear me there?
Yep.
All right, sorry. The problem is that this is consistent. It's not only at the jail. This begins with the indictment process, the charging. It starts with how the FBI conducts its investigation. They're being paid a bonus to go after domestic violent extremists. And who sets the standard for what a domestic violent extremist is today? None other than people like George Washington University, Columbia University under an Obama grant. We'll get into the weeds. I won't go there. But let me explain this to you. After your indictment, then you are held by a judge that may be in bond in your state, one of the 14, 16, 20 people that were held and released on bond, right? The judge that does this every day for a living, a federal judge, Title III judge, releases the individual and says, go home. If you don't appear, you're going to pay this or leave this money and come back. And then a single judge here in D.C., Judge Beryl Howell, the chief judge at the time of January 6th, who set the standard, the reigning orchestrator of this terror plot, managed to take over and deny that bond after looking at the same information. So mom says you can go to the movies. Dad comes back and says no, is essentially what we have based on the same information. Then you are placed in pretrial detention where 72% of your people were veterans and law enforcement, like Ms. Green mentioned earlier, that where she was when she was there. Then you have people there today that are still being denied medical care today. You'll go today and you'll see a deaf man with no hearing aids. This is a fact. This is happening today. They're still denying these people basic civil rights, as you see there in the jail. I don't know what else to tell you about the facts of the matter other than we continue to deliver this information. And I thank you, all of you, for taking the time to have us here and let this first meaningful conversation, to which I pray there are many more, to expose the deficiencies of our justice system, our legal system, and what's happening to American citizens. We used to fight communism abroad, and now we have people in these United States running from it, from the states and the fabric of these United States. And then we have the people that orchestrate this kind of terror campaign being allowed to do it with impunity. As I look around at fellow Americans watching their lives destroyed, their families destroyed, their children destroyed, and all of the testimony that you've heard here today.
Welcome to the second episode of Battlefield USA. I'm happy that you're joining me to this very special episode. And I can tell you this episode is going to be funny, very serious, and very eye-opening because we are going to talk about January 6th. We are talking about the so-called insurrection made by the American people, especially by the MAGA cult, so-called, by the Democrats, left-wing people. And we have a very special guest today. It's Treniss Evans. He will talk with us about his experience at January 6th, what happened to him after January 6th, and what are his plans after Donald Trump got in office. And yesterday, it happened, and we are very happy that Donald J. Trump is back in office. But let me tell you a little bit about Treniss. So Treniss is a best-selling author about the book Call It Insurrection, Comrade, because only comrades, so called communists, would call it an insurrection. Normal people would say it was a protest because and a demonstration. And we will hear why Treniss is a or does call it a demonstration. He's a January 6 defendant, founded the legal advocacy Condemned USA. He's responsible for legal efforts for hundreds of January 6 defendants. He's a public speaker. He's a documentary filmmaker and an expert of January 6 for Trump's legal counsel. He has been featured in 4 documentary films about January 6 and has written 2 books. He already is in the making of another book about pardons around January 6. And he's also prevailing the arguments in the United States Supreme Court as an amici filer for President Trump. So this guy, Treniss Evans, knows what he's talking about, and we're going to jump in directly into our interview with him, hearing firsthand from a person who was actually there and who is not indoctrinated by a narrative built by the left-wing administration, but also by the media and by the authorities with the three-letter agencies. Have fun with this episode. Hi, Treniss. Thank you for having you on our show, Battlefield USA. And what you went through is literally worth a book, and you already wrote a book, and another book is coming, but we will talk about that later. So for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about the January 6, 2021, and why this date was very impacting your life? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. So, it's one of the most discussed topics in living history, maybe now historically of all time. And it's the largest criminal prosecutions, the largest criminal investigation, the largest domestic terrorist effort by the United States government, therefore being the largest in the world in the history of the world, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know of an event that rivals this. And most of us, I think we thought we were going to be there for a demonstration, as I was there. And I was there to demonstrate. I think it's incorrectly categorized when you simply say protest. It's very important that people recognize I wasn't just protesting what was happening. There was an action taking place that day that I was fully in support of, being fully in support of legislators that were coming forward to raise questions, potential objections, and ask that the votes potentially be sent back to the states. All we wanted was for the votes to be reviewed accurately, thoroughly. There was all the conversation about no fraud occurred, nothing was wrong, everything was perfect. It was the most secure election within history. That was a lie. We know that was a lie. We've seen more and more evidence continue to pop up from there. And honestly, just to go off topic for a second, if I might, I think it's important that people realize, well, there was these cases or there was that. Well, that's great. It sounds so. In the same corrupt courts and the same lack of evidence, or that was filed. Essentially, there was filings there. The way the law was written, you had to know exactly how many votes were fraudulent. And if you were over or below the number, if you couldn't assess the perfect number, essentially how many gumballs are in the jar, if you will, then your case would be thrown out. So the way the laws are written or snuck in, if you will, in the wake of the election under the emergency powers, et cetera, to have all this mail-in voting that created this mass fraud issue that happened in our 2020 elections. The laws were written so that it was to subvert any justice or any amount of meaningful review. However, after some time, after people had more time with this, there was more questions arose in the states. They had already turned in their votes to the Electoral College, signified by the governor of that state, and sent on to the United States Congress to be counted at the Electoral College. The states, even some of the states, tried to recall their vote at the legislative branch, and sent their other slate of electors and said, hey, we have a problem here. We want these back. They locked them out of that state. They would not allow them to come into the meeting, which is absolutely absurd. So they didn't want to hear any objection or any cause for any meaningful review at that stage. And on January 6th, I rather contend that forces were at play that did not want to have any cause for a meaningful review of that. They had to plot all the stops because the people that created this, had they have been caught in the action, this is actual treason. They took part in overturning or manipulating a presidential election of these United States. But let's go to the day of. That's why we were there. That was the reasoning, is we simply wanted it reviewed. By the way, we had the hanging chads issue in West Palm Beach, back in Florida, back years ago with the Bush v. Gore, and people were upset. They were frustrated. And what did they do? They put all the information out on the table, and everybody could see it. It was broadcast live the entire time, and they counted votes until they got to the bottom of it. They adjudicated these votes in a meaningful review, multi-party action. Everybody was a witness. The whole nation was watching, probably the world, as we were determining the fate of our presidential election. Like it or not, believe it or not, we were all satisfied, at least to a degree, that there was no mass demonstration or protest or whatever you want to call it, because a meaningful review was done before the eyes of the American people. And therefore, we were at least satisfied that the process had been adjudicated in some fair manner. Unfortunately, with the 2020 election, the Democrats held to the idea time and again, and throughout the history of this, all the way to this date, they held and clung to the idea. This was their ideology. No, you can't look and see what's behind the curtain. We won't show you, but trust us, everything is perfect and fair. That's problematic in its own right. Anyone that has children would know that somebody that's saying, nope, look at me, turn out my pockets. As a matter of fact, if the Democrat Party wanted to undermine Donald Trump, put a fork in him, so to speak, for the euphemism, and ruin him for all time and end all support for MAGA and Donald Trump, et cetera, probably would have set the the Republican Party. The Democrats could have set the Republican Party back 20 years. What they would have done is open up those votes, open up those ballots, not object like the DNC, the Democrat National Committee did, and the Democrats in every state and every legislative branch and at every election site, not object to a review of those ballots, let it come out, open them up, and show that there was no fraud. Wouldn't that be the simple solution, to just review the matter? But yet that didn't happen. And then in Arizona, when they turned up duplicate ballots and problematic issues, the Democrats ran around and claimed victory as if something happened that did not happen at the Arizona review. We saw these processes play out. So that should take you to some respect what happened, why we were there, and what our problems were. Never before had we shown up. We didn't show up for Donald Trump. We showed up for our sacred vote. We showed up because it mattered. We showed up because there was questions about that election, and we asked for a meaningful review. Upon arrival at the United States Capitol, those that finished the speech down at the Ellipse that day, when we walked up Pennsylvania Avenue and we made our way to the Capitol, and masses, million plus people there, which I told you was only tens of thousands. Look at the aerial photography and where people are in the masses and how condensed they are, and compare it to other events where people are on the lawns on blankets with lawn chairs and laid out to watch fireworks, where they make a claim that a million people are present or 600,000 came to watch an event. And look at the masses of people and how they're huddled in and tightly woven. And it's pretty clear to see that the absolute lie yet again occurred of how many people were present that day. It was well over a million. They had agreed that more people were present for the Million MAGA March and these other events, November and December. And then what they claim were there on January 6th. And for those of us that were there, and we had those views from treetops and others where we ran cameras and shown the crowd to our friends and family back home, it was very apparent that the masses were there in much greater numbers, maybe twice what were there just in December. However, that doesn't take us through the event. So I'll get there. I know that's what you're starving for, and the American, people want to hear, right? That's what your audience is here to hear at Battlefield USA. So let me explain. Those of us that finished the speech at the Ellipse, we hadn't eaten, we hadn't had a bathroom access, we were tired, we had been down there since like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. It was now 1 o'clock. People went back to their hotels, they went to the bathroom, they took breaks. These breaks ranged from 30 minutes to maybe a couple hours. The speech didn't end until 1:13. So the speech ends, people go back to the hotel walking. And by the way, all the streets are closed off for the demonstration, as they should be. People walk back to their hotels and Airbnbs or can walk to places where they can get in pack transit and get back. and then go to the United States Capitol. I myself, I'm pretty healthy and move okay. And I moved and I got to the Capitol at about 2:38, I believe it was. That I arrived 2:24 at Capitol grounds and made it up onto the Upper West Terrace around 2:38, I think, 2:40. And interestingly enough, I was unimpeded the entire way there. There's a misconception that everyone lined up behind a group, this group tore down the fence, and then everybody ran in behind them. That didn't happen. There were people that definitely agitated and took action with the Capitol Police at the outer barriers, where there was only a handful of officers for a crowd that size. And those actions led to those barriers being pushed down, and people pushed forward to protest near the Capitol. They wanted their voices heard. First Amendment, I believe that's called. At any rate, upon arrival, so those of us that came later, we saw no outer barrier, we saw no signage, we had no idea, so we simply followed the crowd ahead of us. I walked all the way unimpeded. The only officers I saw, mind you, this was after they had declared a riot, were the ones that stood at all the cross streets blocking our main route, so as if it was protecting it for a parade or a procession or a march to take place. Those officers were well aware if such riot would have been called, they would have been notified over their radios. And the ones that stood by their cars waving at us as we waved at them and yelled back the blue and we love you and support the police, we walked right on by them into what we had no idea was to become a kill zone. That kettling, if you will, that was done allowed us gain access, walk right past. There was no officers, no one saying don't enter, you're entering a riot zone or a restricted area, no signage, no information. And so we all walked right on through all the way up onto the Upper West Terrace, and people walked right on into the building. This is the scene. They show you these pockets of violence. They show you the same scenes on repeat from different angles, multitude of times that only happened, these skirmishes, if you would only happen for some of the minutes at a time in these areas. And then the gates were down and people were advancing and they went on to demonstrate. No police officers were killed on January 6th. No counter protesters were killed. The only people killed on January 6th were four demonstrators that day: Roseanne Boylan, Ashley Babbitt, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. A gentleman named Brian Sicknick, who honorably served in the U.S. military and later as Capitol Police officer, died of a stroke. That was the ruling of the coroner and Harvard medical expert, Dr. Leroy Schwarm, I think his name was, who weighed in on this and said Mr. Sicknick died of a stroke the following day. Now, interestingly enough, as this Capitol Police officer was laid in state, the narrative carried out by the members of would-be select committee, Democrats and others, was that this individual was bludgeoned, beaten to death by the unruly mob that day by individuals who were Trump supporters. They said that we beat this man to death with a fire extinguisher. Then, when that didn't add up and people started asking questions, the narrative quickly changed to the fact that Mr. Sicknick was shot with bear spray from a protester and that someone had essentially murdered him with bear spray. Then, when that narrative fell apart and it was proven that he was never shot by protesters, quote unquote, bear spray, and he was only ever the only evidence we can find at any point in the day of Officer Sicknick being hit with any spray, pepper spray, OC gas, one of these noxious gases that's used for crowd control. The only evidence of that was when another officer sprayed into the wind and this rolled back on Officer Sicknick, as we've seen from numerous videos. I'm sad that anyone died that day. I'm sad that a police officer died. I'm sad that a United States veteran in the name Ashley Babbitt died. I'm sad that a lot of things happened that day, but it doesn't make it an insurrection. And Vicky, I don't think that this makes any sense or anyone can make it make sense, but I'm willing to listen if somebody can. The American public is the most armed populace on the face of the earth by per capita. We own more guns than anyone. I think it's an average of 4.3 per person is the number. So 330 million people, 4.3, do the math, right, of the adult population. And mind you, many minors own guns in these United States because we hunt and we do other activities, shooting sports, etc. But so take this into consideration that the most armed populace on the face of the planet chose to take on with the idea that we were going to overthrow the largest military industrial complex to ever exist on the face of this globe.
Without
with
any
plastic
weapons.
flagpoles and megaphones. Please make that make sense for me. I mean, I've just asked questions and I'm willing to listen to that. No one's ever been able to make sense of that. So what really happened is demonstrators appeared, people that were demonstrating support for those legislators that were doing the job inside and the work that they wanted done. And they wanted to cheer them on like you cheer on your local sports team. And then they were probably not so much cheering on the other people on the other side of the aisle that were going a different direction. However, they advocated support and they advocated that we don't support you and boo hoo and what have you, rah, 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 kick them in the knee, if you will, right? So then the United States Capitol Police actually didn't do quite so bad that day, but who did do quite horribly on that day was the MPD officers or Metro Police Department of Washington, D.C. Interestingly enough, the MPD is the ninth most violent police department in these United States. This isn't by my admission. This is a reporting that's done, independent review that's done on police officers that's been done for some 30 years. They assess the officer's conduct, how many complaints, violent complaints, how many are adjudicated and find that the officer was in the wrong, how many bodily injury and harms take place, abuse of power under the color of authority, etc. MPD is one of the few police offices, MPD is one of the few police departments in the nation that actually hires felons, interestingly enough.
Wow.
Many of the people that you see that were present on January 6th as MPD officers, even some of them had been fired from other offices or other police departments around the nation for things like abuse of power under the color of authority or being overly aggressive or having too many public complaints about their policing tactics.
That's a
Interestingly,
very, yeah, that's very helpful to have then as riot control.
well, of course, wouldn't they make the perfect riot control? I mean,
Yeah.
look, I get it. Protesters can be unruly demonstrators. And so, therefore, I can understand that you might need a heavier hand at times. However, what's happened here is if you relate it to the events of January 20th, 2017, the people that protested Donald Trump's election that actually marched down the street, they brought Class A fireworks and munitions to fire at police, right? That you can actually kill somebody. I mean, this is like a small bomb. And they fired these into police lines, backed the police down blocks and blocks and blocks. They set cars on fire. They set buildings ablaze. They looted, burned, and they marched with the controlled mantra run by certain individuals in that cloud, their leadership that said they would not allow Donald Trump to take office. That was January 20th, 2017. Interestingly enough, those same demonstrators who were far more violent, the police injuries were far more severe that day, somehow managed to end up suing through the ACLU, the city, the Metro Police, etc., to win a $4.3 million lawsuit after their criminal cases kept being found not guilty by the DC jurors. And why was that? Juror after juror, story after story went up about these people being so called social justice warriors, that they were fighting fascism in the name of Trump, who would supposedly never leave office, who intended to name himself king, and all these other absurd ideologies that, oh, shockingly, the mainstream media shares with us. However, people need to understand where that came from and how our mainstream media has been so perverted, if you will. And it's not subjective, it's truly perverse. The idea of what our mainstream media has become is under Barack Obama, they repealed the Smith-Mundt Act, which kept American citizens from being subjected to propaganda. The difference in American citizens now is we are now subjected to propaganda just like North Korea or other communist states. The difference in Americans and the people in the third world country we supposedly feel so sorry for in this day and age is that the American people are fooled and the people in the communist country know that it's propaganda. So that's the sad reality. They have perverted the minds of our young children and because they've indoctrinated them through our education camps, if you will, or re-education camps. They tear down the moral fiber that parents build in them and install this trans ideology and all of this LGBTQ, this and that and the other. And to be quite honest with you, since we're on the topic, I don't really give a damn who you sleep with. I don't care how you dress. I don't care who you marry. That's between you and the other consenting adult. My problem and the American public's problem that starts to rein in or resonate from that issue and rein it in when you start involving the children. That's where the problem began. Nobody cared about drag queens. Nobody cared about cross-dressing or any of these things. I applaud you. Do your thing. Not my problem. That's between you, the consenting adults you choose to be with or around, and God. And that's not my problem. So, and I'm not here to judge them. I don't care. Go back to doing what you were doing and leave the children out of it will be just fine. Drag Queen Story Hour is a problem because sexualizing children for any reason, nobody should be dancing provocatively in skimpily clad outfits and doing burlesque type shows in front of little children where they're stuffing dollars in your G string, whether you have a penis or a vagina, either way. No G strings, no dollars, no kids. These things do not go together. So I'll leave that alone. So before somebody suggests that I'm somehow some
Transphobic.
kind of transphobic, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
no,
the
I'm
word
certainly
now.
not transphobic. Certainly not transphobic. Don't care. Do like I said, do as you will, but do it with consenting adults. Leave the kids out of it, and we'll be just fine. Now, as it goes, and this is the sad reality that starts to bleed into the ideology of people like Tampon Tim that came along and running for vice president of these United States under the absolute cackling jackal Kamala Harris. Thank God we don't have to listen to that for 4 more years. At any rate, moving on. So the United States Capitol. So people like me got there. And I was outside and we were singing the national anthem on the Upper West Terrace, supposedly a violent scene. There was no violence. I never saw anything that happened that looked anything like violence. I saw Capitol Police lined up, people talking to them, standing there. They actually set up a perimeter around a certain door and said, you can't go this way. And everybody understood that. And then suddenly the doors flung open and everybody's going in. Windows were open and people were going in. And the Capitol Police were standing at one side. When you went into the doorway of the Upper West Terrace, they were standing one side of the door to the left, blocking a hallway. And they were pointing that way, pointing the other way, the opposite direction of where they were. And they were giving hugs to people and taking selfies. The video evidence of Baked Alaska and many other journalists that were there that day soundly provide that this is absolute fact. So then people like me come in, we start taking video. We're the looky-loos, if you will, as some people might call it. And I walked down a hallway. I was singing the national anthem over my megaphone. I then led the Pledge of Allegiance, and I entered a building or an area in the building called the Crypt. This is about 70 yards from where I entered, down a single hallway, one turn, exterior hallway of the building, if you will. And I walked along and I got to this room and everybody was there and the police were standing around the perimeter and people were kind of walking around and taking pictures and selfies and waving at people and talking to the police. And I heard somebody try to start a chant, and it was a chant I didn't like. It was certainly disfavorable. And they were saying something in the effect of burn it down. And everybody looked like, who is this person? Like there's somebody walked in the room with 3 heads and 7 legs, right? It was just totally out of character. We didn't make sense. So I immediately took to my megaphone. I abandoned what I drove 1,400 miles across my country for a third time. I abandoned the statements I intended to make of stop the steal and go Congress or whatever, right? Go red. So I abandoned that. I left that ideology behind and immediately began saying, do not harm the police, do not damage the building. This is a peaceful protest. The video evidence of this is vast and wide. It's on CCTV at the Capitol. It's on body cams. It's on my cell phone footage. And it's been shared all throughout social media. People are well aware of these actions. However, somehow I'm an insurrectionist. Now, does that make sense to you?
No, that's why I was asking. At one point, did you started doing the stuff what the left wing and the Democrats saying that this was an insurrection and this was the most horrible day in American history, and we have to be ashamed of MAGA, and they're only crazy people who want power. So I'm waiting on that part of your story.
Yeah, let me get there. Okay, shamefully, I better admit to your viewers what really happened, right? So that's the first part. Now I have to tell the real terrible part. Then the Capitol Police came over to me and they asked me, what can we do? They said, hey, what can we do about getting some of these people out of here? I said, there's more coming. And I had told people myself once I got inside and saw that, I turned around and said, you can bring them in. It's fine. We're fine because we were all talking about it on that terrace. So I went backward on you a little bit. Sorry. But so then I talked to Capitol Police and I said, sir, to hurt you. They said, we just don't want destroying anything. And I said, sir, we're not here to hurt you or destroy our own property. So, I said, I'll remind people. I said, but it's been a powder keg. This finally happened. I mean, people are upset. It's frustration. And here we are. It's a protest, and the guy laughs and I laugh and we had a nice conversation. We shook hands. We take a video shaking hands together and smiling. And the Capitol Police officer wanders away. And I go to say, please back the blue and support the police. Remember, do not break, do not damage, do not harm. We are in a peaceful protest. We're not BLM. We're not Antifa. We don't burn our cities. We don't destroy our buildings. And everybody was fine. And then I decided, well, they're asking people to leave. I did come here to demonstrate, but if they're asking us to leave, I'm going to leave. So I turn around, go right back the way I came. 6 minutes later, 6 minutes, it's been 6 minutes, turned around, headed back. On the way back, I saw an open door to my left that I had missed on the way. I guess it may have been closed. There was people inside. They were having sandwiches. They were sitting around a boardroom table. And on the exterior, along the exterior walls, they had additional seating. It was like maybe they would have a conference in there of pundits, political people, or something of that nature. And maybe the aides would be sitting around. I could imagine that's what would have been the normal scene. But on this day, it was probably much more beautiful than the nonsense that goes on there to screw the American people out of their tax dollars, send it abroad, and do God knows what atrocity to human rights and civil rights across this nation and around the globe. I contend that building being one where more abuses to human rights and civil rights occur and malfeasance than any other building on the face of the planet. Why it's the most protected building. But interestingly enough, so the people are in here, good citizens, and I would bet you that it's been hundreds of years since that room was filled with good citizens, probably at least 100. Probably the first time that building or that room had that many good people, good-hearted, good red-blooded Americans in it that actually held the ideologies of Western civilization, constitutionally correct path, possibly some faith. How dare we, right? So, as I say about that, so then I saw a window. I looked out and I was like, I could see all the people still coming down the roads from both directions and down the National Mall. I could see the police outside. I could see protesters. I could see singing and flag waving. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I want to wave out this window. I'm going to be like the guy on Time magazine. Like some journalist is going to get it. This will be on the cover of Time magazine. It's going to be awesome. Little did I know that later it would be more like an opportunity to create a mugshot. But so I go wave out this window and get back down, and this guy's pulling out a handle of Jack Daniels out of his backpack. And I went, "Oh, may I, sir?" And he says, "Why, but certainly." So, in our best Grey Poupon impression for the old commercial and the Rolls Royce, right? So, I have a shot of his whiskey, offer him a shot of mine, which I fetched from my jacket pocket, handle it. It was cold out. And besides, COVID was going on, so it was very important to keep this around for medicinal purposes.
Yeah, like
So,
disinfection from inside.
of course, I was protecting myself and others from such a horrible death, right?
Yeah.
At any rate, so here we go. So the rampant virus that was only going to get Republicans when we demonstrated, but not for the left. They were always okay. It wouldn't matter. So at any rate, so I have a shot of my own whiskey. I then leave and I go back on the megaphone telling people, urging people to leave the building, figuring they'll get to these guys. They're in here for hanging out. They're clearing the hallways. They'll get these guys eventually, but I'm going to go ahead and leave because I felt it was time to go. So I continue helping, clearing the building. Please leave. The police are asking us to leave. Let's be peaceful. Let's go out orderly. Come on, guys, back the blue and support the police. And people are going, yeah, yeah. And they're turning and leaving. People had just walked in. They're like, I guess I missed it. And, honestly, I don't know what I thought was going to happen inside. Whether they were going to just walk around and protest and demonstrate, or if it was going to be like maybe a 60s style sit in that our parents did. I don't know. I thought whatever it was, it seemed peaceful to me. So I go back outside. I'm excited, and I loan some guy my megaphone. He wanders off with it to use it. And then I see another guy duck inside with it. I'm like, I'm not going back in there. I'll buy a new $160 megaphone, right? I'll get over it. So um, after a while of standing on the terrace, I decided, you know, maybe they'll pop out the other side. I'll go look around, see if somebody's spouting off on my megaphone because I want to go. It's cold. I'm tired. The police don't want us in here. Obviously, I noticed that the windows have been broken out, and I was like, this is probably not that good. get out of here. I kind of missed that, having a little sauce on the way in, and didn't really pay much attention to it. And at any rate, so I get back around the other side of the building, and the scene is totally different. It's not people singing patriotic songs. There's people standing up in the windows, kicking out windows, and you could see like people fighting with them from inside. You could just see hands and so forth coming from inside the window, and people trying to kick them out. And I was like, oh God, no, I'm not here for this. This isn't what I want to be a part of. I'm leaving. I'm just screw the megaphone. I'm out of here. So I go back around this big long balcony on the outer terrace of the Capitol, and I start heading down the same stairs I came up. And lo and behold, there's a guy standing there with a blue megaphone with two knots tied in it that fit my little carabiner, so I didn't have this thing beating me in the hip when I walked. And I go up to the guy and I'm like, hey, you buddy, mine, let's go. My megaphone. Yeah, you're done. Thanks for sharing. Whatever it was, wrap it up, And it was Richard Barnett, the famous iconic guy with the feet up on the desk of Nancy Pelosi. And which I think Richard Barnett's a fantastic folk legend hero. I mean, I'm I'm honestly quite the fan of Richard Barnett. I think he's fantastic. Good for you. What what a true assault on democracy. How dare you put your feet on the desk that Nancy Pelosi might choose to rest her on? It's, rules for thee and not for me. And so, people, I've had somebody question me additionally, I just got to say this. I've had people question me, oh, you were drinking in the Capitol. I stood on Capitol Hill and testified to this years later and made the statement in front of members of Congress under testimony and said, if drinking in the United States Capitol were a crime, then why isn't Nancy Pelosi doing life in prison? So,
Okay, that's a good one. That is
yeah, hey,
good.
well, yeah, well, it is. I like facts. I like, the subjective thing. Let's why don't we think about this for a minute? If it's such a affront to something, then why has this woman constantly been drunk over the last 25, 30 years up there? I mean, we've all seen it, right? I mean, we all know when someone's drunk,
Yeah.
and we've seen it plenty of times.
Yeah, that's
Old
probably
tipsy.
her way to go to get into the
Yeah.
to work. So
Where's my gavel? Anyway, so whatever. Oh gosh. Oh. So I go down the steps and this gentleman approaches me and he says, hey, you've got a megaphone. This megaphone, I tell you, it sure got me in a lot of trouble. And I didn't use it I never used it for anything bad. Anyway, the guy says, hey, you've got a megaphone. You've got to read this. It's President Trump's tweets. I began to read the tweets, each and every tweet that I was available at the time, all the way through, I think, 3:38 in the afternoon. I read all of these tweets, including, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving the states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or accurate ones that they were asked to previously certify. We, the people, demand the truth, and it said blah, 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 one of these. And then I added my own statement at the end. That was the actual first tweet. So I read it last, right? In the succession, because you know how that works, right? The first one's at the bottom. So in this succession of tweets, this gentleman had pulled. So I said, okay. And at the end of that, I said, I don't support looting. I don't support violence. I support a peaceful protest to put them on notice that we, the people, demand justice. How horrific. I mean, for shame. I don't know how many times I should repent for such an awful statement that I've made in helping the police and drinking that shot of my whiskey, my own whiskey. So I leave Capitol grounds. I go down to the Freedom Plaza Hotel where I'm staying. I walk in. I go back to the lobby where everybody's gathered in front of TVs watching this. And they're like, Joe Biden comes on special address. What those people did was they're not patriots and protesters. They're insurrection and sedition. And I was like, what? I mean, first of all, you got that many multiple syllable words out of your mouth in like one sentence and didn't stumble over them. That was a new test for Joe Biden himself. But it dawned on me, I was like, there's no way Joe Biden came up with this at this fast.
yeah.
There's something wrong here. And I'm drastically wrong. I was like, because the place I just was, there was no insurrection. I know what insurrection is. The place I just was, there was no sedition. That was absurd. There was a protest, and Capitol Police were handing out hugs and giving fist bumps and shaking hands with people. That's what I saw. And that's what the video evidence clearly shows. You can watch the CCTV footage of my whole journey. And I wasn't like it was a Mr. Magoo episode where I just happened on to the next thing. And the violence had already ended by the Lower West Terrace. What little occurred after, don't forget, the police force, MPD, the most violent, had issued or I'm sorry, the police force, the most violent in the ninth most violent in the nation, had begun to misuse and abuse non-lethal or less than lethal munitions to deploy them on a peaceful crowd who was singing at the time, God Bless America, was the song people were engaged in, waving flags and banners, strollers and the kids, grandma and grandpa, everyone's there. This wasn't vile insurrectionists. They say, oh, well, but people were dressed in, military looking garb. They were dressed in paramilitary gear. No shit. Have you not seen what Antifa and BLM were doing? Have you
Yeah.
not seen Baltimore, Portland? Have you not seen what happened to citizens in places like Dallas? And guess what? Those of us that had been there in November and December were aware of this. And we wanted to be protected. Some of us chose to wear that. Now, not me. I was wearing my drab green ski jacket that I bought years before. It's uh, at a ski trip at Steamboat. They do sell the best military gear at Steamboat Springs ski resort. It's so absurd, right? You just can't make it up. It's a joke at this point, right? For the informed, it's a joke. For the uninformed, I'm so sorry that you don't know the truth yet. I'm not denying that people committed acts of violence that day, but if I may, Vicky, if you and I are sitting at lunch somewhere and I see something happen and I start filming it, and I see one individual if individual A begin assaulting individual B, and you turn around and you start your phone just as individual B starts getting the better of the deal, right? And now individual B is knocking the snot out of individual A. Okay. If we play those two videos, people have a different perspective, right? If they only see yours, all of a sudden, individual B is the perpetrator and the
Yeah,
terrible
the
person.
aggressor.
Yes, the aggressor. Now, under the abuse of power, under the color of authority, police officers be given a badge. They're not just to randomly beat people and are not allowed to just randomly beat people and deploy munitions into a peaceful crowd. And that's what happened.
Yeah, there
They
was
fired these things
there was a
at people's
case.
heads.
Yeah, like there was one what went through the cheek.
Joshua Matthew Black is that gentleman's name.
Oh, mhm.
Joshua Matthew Black was the proud recipient of a new hole in his cheek that was in by the unlawful deployment of munition that was intended to be less than lethal. That munition was fired at head height into a peaceful crowd. Even if the crowd's a ruckus, you don't get to fire that type of munition, firing those grenades and firing those rubber bullets into heads, right? When people are
Yeah.
standing shoulder to shoulder in a crowd, it becomes a lethal projectile. You can kill someone. The design, it says, caution, do not use above torso. These are very damaging. The idea is to try and use them from the waist down, right? They hurt, they sting, they leave a big bruise. It's painful. But if you shoot someone in the head, you can kill them, or in
Yeah.
the eye, put an eye out, right? Or it can go through someone's cheek, as it did Joshua Matthew Black. So all of these things that you saw as we've started to see more video, just like all things, the government, the mainstream media came out, they hit a hard narrative. People bought it in 60 and 90-second bites and these long reviews by the select committee. But yet they brought these same officers in that day and to talk about the event. This will skip forward to June 9, 2022. The select committee began, right? They were having their first video production of evidence, so-called video production of evidence. They were having a video production, but it was a Hollywood style theater, narrated, nonsensical, J-cut, Hollywood tactics all over it, misrepresentation, tampered evidence, selectively edited. Bullshit is what that was. I know from many reasons because one of the videos was of me that came out in the first few minutes of this thing. In the very first few minutes of this video comes me on the megaphone reading Trump's speech, right? Or tweets, excuse me, reading Trump's tweets.
Yeah, but that was in the end.
What's that?
That was when it was at the end because you because you
I was
told us,
leaving.
yeah. When
This
you
was at 4:17 in the afternoon. I was leaving the building, leaving the grounds at 4:17 when this gentleman asked me to read them. Yet the select committee somehow managed to timestamp a video that they received from a journalist that surely they had the metadata. These people are intelligent, right? Hopefully, intelligent enough to lie and create false narratives. They changed the timestamp from 417 to 224 and put it in big bold letters up on the screen. I was shocked. It's like, what the hell is this? This isn't what happened. They know better. This is not accurate. I didn't read this at 224. 224 wasn't even at the freaking grounds. What the hell are they talking about? So I began petitioning every member of the House Judiciary and the House Select Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee to testify. I was like, these people want people to come testify. They're subpoenaing all these people. Perfect. Get me up there. Let's go. Couldn't get them to answer. They didn't want to talk to me. When I talked to their staffers and I talked to committee staffers, nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody wanted to discuss anything with me. I told them I had video that undermined this. So I thought just maybe they were wrong. And then it dawns on you. This is my government. They're here to help, just like Ronald Reagan said, right? Help the American people understand what really happened on January 6th. They weren't helping, they were lying. And it's all come out now that they destroyed evidence, tampered with evidence, that they misled the American public. But they want to hide behind the speech and debate clause. The speech and debate clause isn't for tampering with evidence and fraudulently altering evidence. If I did to that footage what they did to that footage and released it as fact from some official position, I'd be in prison. We'd be having this call and they'd be saying, you have 1 minute remaining, right? So, but that's not what happened. So moving from there, let me help you further in your audience. Then I really appreciate you having me today so we can have this conversation. But your audience should also know that they were in trouble with their narrative. They needed to round it out and do something with it. So they enacted the Patriot Act, the same one we use for terrorism, right? The people, when we were scared and we were hurting after 9/11. So they used this and they called us domestic violent extremists and enacted the Patriot Act and used the Joint Terrorism Task Force to hunt down American citizens. They wanted to hunt us down. They hunted down American citizens using the Patriot Act through the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And this served as their narrative domestic violent extremists. Do you know that FBI agents get a bonus when they make an FBI arrest on a domestic violent extremist or
I didn't
DVE?
know, but
Yes, they
that's the
do.
same thing
And do you
with
know?
doctors with the COVID shot. They got extra dollars for putting that poison into you. So yeah, that's
Yes. Oh, you glad you know it's poison. Good. I'm on the right show. So
yeah.
anyway,
We're gonna
I'm glad
get,
you're
we have to keep the algorithm kind of going. So
right. Well, if you want to get a poison thing and whatever, yeah, right, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, step right up, get your next upgrade for poison
yeah,
2.7 and poison 8.0, right?
yeah.
No, thank you. It's amazing that I'm still here and I haven't had any of those, and I've been in crowds of millions of people. It's just the wildest thing. At any rate, thank God the flu. The best thing about COVID actually is it eviscerated the flu and all the other problems we had annually. Thank God for that. I mean, I really am grateful to COVID for getting rid of the flu. So anyway, but we are supposed to say happy, nice things. That's the new algorithmic suggestion, right? So wait, let's look. Thank God for COVID. It got rid of the flu. Anyway. God,
Yeah,
I can't
keep the
help
silver
myself.
linings.
Yeah, right. I can't help myself. So here we go. I know you're going to cut this up, so you're going to have fun with that. So enjoy yourself later. So, all right. So the select committee went on to falsify and fraudulently alter more evidence and further reviews of so-called evidence that they shared with the American public. Therefore, what they did was tantamount to what appeared to be a jury trial for people that they were witnessing. They thought this was a trial. And they saw people testifying, and they took their oath and they promised, and then they outright lied and perjured themselves time and again, the officers. And I'm still waiting to be sued. Harry Dunn, if you're out there, Michael Fanone, please, Aquino Ganell, here I am, Treniss Evans, Condemned USA Legal Advocacy. I invite your civil suit to come my way. You lied. You fraudulently altered evidence at the select committee. And then the officers, in many cases, perjured themselves. Let me say it slower and louder for those in the back. Slower for the Democrats, louder for those in the back. Officers who testified before the United States Capitol Select Committee perjured themselves on that day. Officers who then testified in United States District Court in front of numerous judges perjured themselves that day. I'm taking all comers anytime you guys want. I wrote a book, you're in it, and you know this happened. So please, by all means, anytime you're ready. So, at any rate, through their perjury and this absolute lie, fraudulent narrative, and the things that happened throughout time, here we end up with where we are today: a tainted jury pool, a corrupted process, judges who operate with impropriety from the slimy vines, it's not a family tree, the slimy vines of a incestuous family vine that grows out of a swamp called Washington, D.C. And we find that people like Judge Tanya Chutkan, and we find these other individuals, Tanya Chutkan, whose grandfather, Frank Hill, was credited with starting the Marxist Party in Jamaica. Amazing. And the Jamaican people still today go, don't take my word for it. Read some information on Mr. Hill. They claim he's responsible for the economic decline of Jamaica. Oh, shocking. Marxist communist policies didn't work somewhere. Where have we seen that before? All over the damn world. At any rate, then you take people like my judge, Dabney Friedrich. Interesting story. Her husband, Michael Friedrich, he was the prosecutor for the Ted Stevens case, who, listen to this prosecutor who knew that the evidence was bad that he was using, and Emmett Sullivan, the judge, same one that went after General Michael Flynn, right? Same dirty players, same place, just new lineup of people to go after. These henchmen for the Democrats, Michael Friedrich, he was absolutely guilty of prosecutorial misconduct by the admission of many people involved in that case. And yet nothing ever happened to this gentleman. But it's okay. He lives in a 7,200 square foot home in Maryland now with his wonderful wife, Dabney Friedrich, who is nothing but a fraud on the bench. And anyway, let's go to another one. Let's talk about Beryl Howe. Beryl Howe, Chief District Judge of Washington, D.C. Oh, I got to sit up for this one. This one gets me excited. Chief District Judge Beryl Howe. So she was in charge, setting the precedent, if you will, for how to handle the January 6 cases. Judge Beryl Howe regularly overturned federal judges all across this nation to the tune of 14 of them, who granted bond to an individual, said, okay, here's your bail amount, $10,000, $50,000, go home, await trial, blah, 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 whatever that process was. And many of them on their own recognizance, by the way, didn't even set a bail amount. And Judge Beryl Howe said, this was the crime of the century, and these are insurrectionists, and it's horrible, and we must bring them here and detain them pre-trial in Washington, D.C. During COVID, we traveled people all across the country, exposed federal marshals and agents and FBI, and we did SWAT team raids on people that walked around in the building for the most part. This is amazing. It can only get better from here. Then Judge Beryl Howe creates a legal precedent called the Cressman Six, as if no one's ever assaulted an officer before, as if no one's ever impeded an officer in their duties, as if no one's ever demonstrated in this country before, as if no one's ever trespassed or paraded and picketed on Capitol grounds, as if none of these things have ever happened or violated the sanctity of a secure area, right? So under 1752, as has been done at every protest since God knows us, all the years I've been alive, for 50 years, right? And the history well beyond. Yet, here we are with individual Beryl Howe, who says these people are so dangerous. They're a threat to democracy. And under the guise of a threat to democracy, we lock them up in the gulag. We don't give them medical treatment. We deny them haircuts, basic hygiene. We deny them communication, visits with their family, unless they'll get the thing in their arm, right? So, and this is serious, folks. It really is. So I don't hate to detract from it with a little horseplay, but sometimes we have to laugh a little to get past all the pain that we know. So moving forward, as this event continued to unfold, people were locked up. Hundreds, 72% of the original people locked up in the gulag. Do you know that they were veterans or law enforcement officers, or a combination thereof? Veterans who were then law enforcement? It's very interesting. Why is it that people that took an oath to the United States Constitution felt so compelled to do something that got them locked up in prison? Is it because they came for an insurrection? Well, we've already had that question. You mean to tell me highly trained special forces and military individuals, man, that they came there without their rifles to overthrow the federal government? Come on, man. Get a grip, right? So the people that hang on to that narrative really need to get a grip. So, but no, the reason was because they know the rules for law enforcement. They know the rules. You're taught the Constitution when you take law enforcement and you become a member of the military. You learn these things about abuse of power under the color of authority, what you can and can't do to a citizen if you're in a war-torn area, what you can and can't do to a citizen if you're working the beat in your local metropolitan area or rural area. So they knew, they've been trained, and they saw what happened, and they came forward and said, "You can't do that. Stop. Capitol police officers, stop. MPD, stop." And what did they do? They struck out to beat them with the baton, and they went, "Screw you, buddy. I'm a cop too. What you're doing removes your authority right now." So they battled back and said, "Stop. You can't do this." And they fought to try and save lives, like Roseanne Boylan, as people like Officer Lila Morris were beating an unconscious woman with a stick. The video's out there. Don't take my word for it. I would like people to make their own assessment. That's the one I drew because it's pretty plain when Lila Morris is delivering these striking overhead blows with a walking stick, like a 4-foot walking stick that she picks up off the ground, to an unconscious woman laying on the United States Capitol steps, Roseanne Boylan, who died. Patriots administered life-saving support to her. Capitol Police, not so much. Once they drug her through the building a ways and got her back behind their police line, they managed to destroy the defibrillator that she needed for life-saving care. So one of the most fierce battles I saw that day was Capitol Police doing battle with the defibrillator machine to destroy it before Roseanne Boylan got the much needed life saving care she deserved as an American citizen at our United States Capitol, who was pushed under a crowd by Capitol Police who made no sense in their effort. It was the most tactical. By the way, I'm a little bit of a tactician. I like war stories and models, and I like all those things in chess. I don't know what tactical blunder these morons were engaging in when they had a hallway, a tunnel, and it had steel frame door frames. Granted, of whether or not they were open or closed or whatever the situation was with glass, the framework was still there. And they chose to move forward to defend the position at the end of the tunnel and push out into the crowd. You were going to push out into 1 million people with a couple dozen riot officers? Not very tactically intelligent. I would say more so Neolithic incompetence was execution with the style of there. Neolithic incompetence and totally inept. But anyway, I mean, I'm sure I don't know where they got this training for these militarized police forces, but well, yes, we do. The MPD sends its officers, head officers for SWAT team, to do militarized training sessions with Israeli militarized police. Isn't that interesting how that works? You know, the DC citizenry for decades have been the defund the police crowd, that our police are violent, they're gang members, they're thugs with badges and guns. That's what the DC citizenry has said about MPD for decades, right? And they're still complaining today at their city council. But yet we're to believe that this thuggish, violent gang members with guns and badges, as they're called by their own citizens, rose from the whale shit that they had been subjected to as a label. On that day, they became the most heroic and amazing and just individuals to ever wear the badge, and they're true heroes and purveyors of freedom and democracy. That's what they are on that day. But only on that day, because don't worry, read the headlines. Don't take my word for it, folks. Go back to what the city council says, and people are testifying about them all the time, and the complaints run rampant about the violence and the violence campaigns and the orchestrated terror that they unleash on their citizens. Don't take my word for it. Please go look for yourself. So now we've covered MPD, we've covered the perjury, we've covered a little bit about this. What happens in the aftermath? People like me are at home, and I called an attorney. I had a business attorney. I did not have an attorney that handled criminal matters for me because I've never been a criminal. So here I am at the ripe old age of 46. Been to jail once when I was in college for a night. Oh, imagine that. well, that. So anyway, mixing it up a little in the pub, right? So, whoa, I'm really out of hand individual there at 20 years old or whatever. So, that's the extent of my criminal history, folks. Sorry to bore you. So, at any rate, here I am, and I'm talking to this attorney, and she's like, "Look, I wouldn't worry about it. You showed me your videos," and she said, "There's no way these people don't want you. They're looking for the people that did the pipe bomb, and they're going to be looking for people that were violent. They're going to look for people that maybe destroyed something or broke windows, or that's who they're looking for. They're not going to be looking for a guy on a megaphone saying don't harm the police. That's so far down their radar they couldn't even imagine be interested in you." Oh, okay, great. January 17th, here they come. Tut, tut, tut. Two plainclothes officers, and they look like, I thought they were selling magazines, or maybe they're the Jehovah's Witness or whatever, right? And so I was like, "Hey, how can I help you?" And FBI, and I'm like, "Oh God." And I'm
Okay.
like, "Look, are you arresting me? Like, I don't know what's going on. Look, I already called an attorney, so I'm not going to talk. I'll tell you this. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't break anything. I didn't vandalize anything. I didn't harm anyone. The only contact I had with the Capitol Police was shaking hands and fist bumping with them and them thanking me and patting me on the back, as your own CCTV footage will show and my video evidence shows. It's well preserved. By the way, I have it with numerous attorneys because I don't trust the government. But I'll be happy to cooperate. Got nothing to hide. If you're arresting me, look, I've got kids here that are like 11 and 13, my younger son's age, and there was boys and girls here at my house, and we live on the lake, so I was a little concerned leaving young kids. I said, I need to call somebody if you're arresting me. They're like, "Oh no, Mr. Evans, we just wanted to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, we're talking. What do you want to know?" I just an open book with them, and I said, "But I, really need to have my attorney present and really get into the depth of this. But I'll make the statement that I committed no acts of violence, destruction, property theft, et cetera, et cetera." And they said, "Okay, thank you." And they said, "Well, are you have any knowledge of any groups or people that would have been doing saying or committing insurrection?" I'm like, "Look, okay, I don't have any knowledge of any groups or any people. You can have my videos. I'll give you everything. I just want my attorney present, like sign them out or however that works. Unless you have a warrant." We had a really nice conversation. They thanked me. We traded numbers. I gave my attorney's phone number, and they left. So my father-in-law dies, 30 years chief of police in nearby San Antonio area, suburb area. We're going to the viewing of the body on March 4th. That day I was with my wife, and she's sobbing in bed and still. And I got up, and I was working in the office and I had made coffee, and I was sitting in my office, which faces out of my front porch, and I can see my front lawn and porch. And I look up in time to see these officers storming down my steps, battering ram, flashbang grenade in hand. I mean, it's a terror scene. Like, I was in shock. I mean, I've never seen anything like this except in the movies. I mean, they're everywhere. I look up, I see them on the surveillance cameras. They're everywhere. I mean, they're sprawling down both sides of the house. And I'm like, holy shit, they must be looking for El Chapo, like what's going on here? Like, this is horrific. I'm just blown away by what I'm seeing. And lo and behold, they're at the battering ram at my front door, and I was like, "This is over January 6th. What the hell are they doing?" I'm yelling for my wife, "Honey, put the dog up. These people are going to shoot the dog. The whole back of my house is glass. We're about here on the golf course on the lake. I'm like, put the dog away, quick, put the dog away. Don't, if the dog comes blasting at the glass, they might shoot it." She's putting our old hound dog away. She's yelling, "What?" And I can't. And I'm going to the door to stop him from hitting it with the battering ram. I already had to replace the glass in that door a few years before. And teenagers, $1,200. I was like, "Good God, stop!" I don't even want to get hurt. So I go to the answer the door, and I'm like, "Hey, no, what is all this? Why are we doing this, Mr. Evans? Step outside." And I looked to see my 13-year-old son at gunpoint, who had left for school 20 minutes before. They rounded him up. They collected him. It was at gunpoint on my front porch. When you see your 13-year-old kid at gunpoint,
No.
automatic weapons pointed at my 13-year-old son as if he's a threat. I mean, this is a kid, clean cut kid, plays basketball and golf, and it's on the ballroom dance team. A real threatening looking kid, let me tell you. I mean, he looks about as threatening as I do. And he's going to school in a pair of gym shorts and a t-shirt with his backpack on. I mean, he's at gunpoint and he's looking terrified. We have the video of all
Understandable.
this, Vicky, and I was just disheveled in that moment. I was like, I can't believe you're doing this. And they were like, oh, yeah, Tristan, you can go over there with your mom. After she was outside in her bathrobe, nightgown on the front porch. They let her get her bathrobe on finally. And I knew right then that I was never going to be friends with this part of my government again. You created me. They did this. What I am today, I'm not the guy with the lampshade on the head anymore. I'm not the guy that's the life of the party anymore. I am not the semi-retired business person living out at the lake. Um, I'm an activist. I'm dedicated. I'm committed to freedom from people. I don't ever want to see this kind of thing happen to anyone else again. And they can shove this narrative right straight up their ass. They can take this and put it where the sun doesn't shine. I'm not playing ball anymore, and I'm not playing games anymore. I'm very serious about where we are today. I'm very serious about the future of my country, and I'm very serious about the safety of my family. Don't come back pulling that shit ever again. Start there. I've said it for 4 years, and I mean it as much now as I meant it then. Don't ever come back to my house pointing guns at my family. If you want me to come in, you got a problem with me, you pick up the phone and call me, and I'll be right on over. I'll come into your FBI office. I'll come to your DOJ. I'll come to your local county sheriff. But don't ever come here again pointing guns at my family because it will not go the same. Now, we have that out of the way, and I'm very clear about it. I am a very peaceful individual. Don't like violence, don't like fights. It doesn't mean I'm not capable of it. And I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply saying I will protect my family from lawfare, malfeasance, maladministration of government. I won't put up with it again, and neither will many others. I am not in that position anymore. You've endangered my life, and you were going to haul me off and put me in prison for 23 years for protesting until you got caught. And if I didn't have my own videos, the stuff you guys delete and hide, but we won't give us, and they say it's national security, and we can't have this video and can't have that video. The FBI, after all of this, then tried to make me work for them. While I was on federal probation, they came to me
After they
and said,
pointed,
yeah.
oh,
2 years later, they came to me and said, look, Mr. Evans, you're on federal probation and, things could go good for you. Things could go bad. Sometimes it works for people. Sometimes it doesn't. And what we want to do, and let me give it to you the way they gave it to me. I want to make sure you understand this as I sat up in the chair. Mr. Evans, we're really here. We want to try and help you out. We're the kind of guys that we can call your AUSA. That's your attorney, the Assistant United States Attorney, the person prosecuting you, right? We're the kind of guys that can contact your AUSA. It can go good for you and maybe not so good in cases. We want to help you out. As a matter of fact, we could pay you. We could even pay you. You could come to work for us. And we could pay you and you could have a job, it could be secure, and we could pay you monthly. We can pay up to 30 grand a month, depending on how good your information is and what you can do for us. It can be very lucrative. Or we could be back in this side. We want to help you, but let us help you because, I know you want to be with your family. And I'm on probation at this point for a misdemeanor. I've been found guilty of trespassing, a misdemeanor. So I'm now on probation for a misdemeanor, and I go through this. Oh, and it was, let me give you this. This was my favorite part. Let's make sure I get this. Mr. Evans, you need to read between the lines here and understand what's important. We know what's important to you and your family. I want you to read between the lines and understand how we can help you. We want to help you, but sometimes if we can't help you, things can go another way. They threatened me. And then they told me not to tell my judge, not to tell my attorney, and not to tell my probation officer, which are all violations of the rules of federal probation, by the way. So I'm in this now pickle of a conundrum. What do you do, right? What the hell do you do? You mean to tell me the idea is I'm not allowed to tell my attorney? First of all, you just violated my rights. And I'm not supposed to tell my judge, you just violated a court ordered probation. And I'm not supposed to tell my probation officer, which makes me in violation of the agreement that I have probation. So I have my choice now. I either listen to mom or dad. Like it's this really confusing thing. Like dad says you can go to the movies, mom says you better not. What do you do? This isn't even that. One of them tells you you better go swimming, the other one says you better go paint the fence. I mean, like, you've gotten direction from both places. They're both in positions of authority, and one is threatening you, and one's the FBI. What do you do? What would you do? What would you do? I know what I did. I said, "Fuck you."
That's
I
good.
got up and yeah.
Yeah.
I said, "You've been more than kind enough. You've been so kind as to give me 3 hots and a cot and provide me meals already. I think you've done more than enough." And I got up and I took my shit and I left.
How long were you in prison?
So I was not in prison at this time. I was in probation, federal probation, after I said to serve my sentence. They can shove that up their sentence too, by the way. Sorry, I get a little emotional about that part. So,
No, just
um,
get it out.
I think it's the kind of threats that you want to threaten me? Look, if I break the law, hold me accountable, make it equitable, do it the way you treat everybody else. Otherwise, up yours. We're going to have a problem. And that's where I am today. That's why I'm sitting in this office doing an interview. That's why I'm doing this with you right now. It's what I've been doing for 4 years, not this, but legal advocacy and the work. And there's 3 Supreme Court victories up there. From a
Perfect.
guy that's not an attorney. There is work that's been done. I've written and created with the help of some others, but I orchestrated, committed, and commissioned. I orchestrated, commissioned, and or this largest body of work that's ever been done on change of venue. It is a massive body of work. It's on my website. It's there for free on Condemned USA. We've given everything away. We didn't charge anyone for anything. We gave it all away. It was fighting back. This was my fight back at the United States government for what they've done to not only me, but other American citizens and veterans. They did this to, many of these people in the FBI, they serve in the military and then they go serve in the FBI. And then they did this to their own brothers and sisters of the military. You did this to your military brother? What is wrong with these people? Are they indoctrinated? Are they corrupt? I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is they operate with unparalleled impunity to break the law, to operate with malfeasance, to destroy any credibility that these organizations had. That's why they have to be stripped down if we ever consider building them back up. People talk about, well, what about threats and what about terror? When you look at the FBI and you look into the eyes of most of these people, I think you're looking at terror. You're looking at the actual terrorists. The problem is we've given the terrorists guns and badges and marching orders to go after American citizens. Don't care about how they do their surveillance. Don't care if they follow the investigative rules. Don't care about your civil rights. Don't care about your constitutional rights. Don't have any interest in a just process, only victory at the cost and expense of all things. That's not consistent with any oath that's taken to these United States for any purpose. It's inconsistent. It's wrong. It's blatantly abusive. It's unconstitutional. And I want my rights back. I want my freedoms back. I want a correct process. I'm doing 5 years of federal probation for a 4-point misdemeanor trespassing charge where I helped Capitol Police and drank a shot of my own whiskey, and I had to go to federal prison, locked up on the weekends. I was the first person to get weekend prison. They sent me to Federal Department of Corrections, HBD Houston, and they put me in maximum security, chained up like Hannibal Lecter, in a solitary confinement cell that they bragged about was the one they held the 9/11 terrorist. It was escape proof. And they close the steel door and they don't open it again. And on Monday morning, I walked out and went, all right, see you guys next week.
You can't make that up.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know whether to throw something or throw a party. the absolute injustice, the malfeasance that took place here, the abuse of the American citizens in this time. Well, we have actual terrorists. There's an Al Qaeda training camp less than 200 miles from me. I can get to that faster than I can get to the federal prison they sent me to. I'd have to pass 3 other federal detention centers to get there, or within that radius, I should say. But they managed to send me one 400 miles away to Houston, 300 and some odd miles away to Houston, Texas. But I could go spend my time in an Al Qaeda training center, and the FBI is not interested.
That's a
But if
question.
I'm a Christian and I own an AR-15, all of a sudden I'm a domestic terrorist threat.
Yeah, that's a threat. Like that's what CNN said when you don't
The
believe
Communist News Network?
Yeah,
The
when you don't
purveyors
believe
of
in
absolute
9/11 and say the election was rigged and some other stuff that makes you directly to a domestic terrorist.
You brought up a great point. So listen, these people have said, you've heard it said, Kamala Harris, you've heard it said by Nancy Pelosi and all these pundits, and Joe Biden when he can get a couple of sentences out audibly. The January 6th was somehow akin to 9/11. The January 6th was somehow akin to Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was a foreign nation attacking us with bombs and planes and armament and machine guns, missiles, projectiles, I should say, torpedoes, etc., and sinking battleships. January 6th was a bunch of grandmas and old ladies screaming, stop the steal, and a handful of guys that stood up for them when the police abused them. What, if any events in history resonate with me, if any events in history resonate better with me, around the idea of January 6th. It's certainly not 9/11. It's certainly not Pearl Harbor. It's Kent State. It's Tiananmen Square. Those are the events that I find to be like January 6th. What's the body count that day? If we came for an insurrection, you mean to tell me highly trained special forces, thousands upon thousands, maybe tens of thousands of United States veterans were there, and we killed nobody? We didn't kill any police? Where's all the injuries? You talk about these injured police. They tell you 140 officers were injured. Show us. Show us the injuries. You mean they hurt your feelings? Or you got a boo-boo? I mean, you had to put on a Band-Aid? You scraped your elbow? Fuck you. I mean, seriously, fuck you is where I'm at with that, right? 90 of the 140 injured officers were injured by 90 of the 140 injured officers were injured by CS gas, noxious gas sprays.
Yeah, but that's what they
that
use.
were
Or
That's what they deployed. And they did idiots deployed it into an oncoming 20-mile-per-hour wind. So
that's
they
not
fire a
funny.
projectile that they thought was going to go 70 yards, and it goes 40 yards because they fired it into a 20-mile-per-hour wind, this canister. It falls short, and then the wind blows it back all over these officers. It gasses them, and that's what causes the breakdown of the police line at the Lower West Terrace. They've tried to blame it on all kinds of where they focus in. And look here, where we see here now where the line breaks down at 2:24 p.m. You see this demonstrator pull on the fencing in the gate. It's absurd. Look at the camera's number 0943, 0945, and the camera that comes from the Capitol Dome. Why don't they show you the drone footage? Because you'd really be able to hone in on what happened. But they always start out here and then they bring it in and they show you what happened. Just leave it out here for a minute. Let's see what happened. It's a different story.
It doesn't fit the narrative. That's why they have to.
None of it fits the narrative because it's bullshit. The narrative's always been bullshit. This is about an attack on conservatives. They went after school board moms that protested or stood up, didn't even protest. They were standing up speaking out for their children's right at a school board meeting. And because they brought a Bible with them, or they had a flag, a "Don't Tread on Me" flag on the back of their car, all of a sudden they were domestic violent extremists and they reined them into the narrative. These are the same people. Remember, they said that they wanted to lock up Donald Trump supporters. They wanted to lock us up. They wanted to have re-education camps for Donald Trump supporters. And they did. People don't know this, but they did. The American Gulag the DC Gulag. They did re-education materials for demonstrators. This is a document. The Poison Pill in the Gulag is what we titled it. This document, so normally used to go once upon a time, and I'm going to show this to you. I probably didn't send it. Sorry.
No
So
problem.
once upon a time, you go to prison, you go to jail, they give you a chance to learn a skill, a craft, a trade, a second language, basket weaving, whatever, right? Get some, occupy your time, come out a better person, be a better part of society. It gives you opportunity. Maybe your life of crime was stealing car stereos, and now you can be a plumber, or now you can be a whatever, a machinist or something, a welder, whatever, right? Whatever you want to do, they have all these opportunities because it's supposed to re-educate. But in this case, lesson 1, Donald Trump, how he has attacked our democracy. I mean, I'm not kidding. These are the lesson plans that were issued on the tablet. Who the hell came up with the lesson plan? Lesson 2, Trump's crimes before he called for the attack on our democracy. CNN, in the summer of 2017, Trump personally intervened to try and block a merger between AT&T and Time Warner in order to try and punish CNN, which is owned by Time Warner, for its unfavorable coverage of him. This is literally it. The ultimate in propaganda. Deaths, ambulance, fraud. The president of the United States is a fraudster. Don't take my word for it. In November 2016, less than 2 weeks after he was elected, Trump settled 3 different fraud lawsuits related to his Trump University for $25 million. These were opinion pieces that were put in here. It was a lesson plan. Kids in cages. I mean, go look it up. It's true. It's on my website. You can pull it for your people. This is the bullshit that they fed these people. And if you pass the class, I guess you get a extra dessert or the same kind of shit they wanted to offer me, maybe, if I would come to work for them. Maybe you get a lot of money. I don't know what they
Maybe you
wanted.
would be the employee of the month.
I might be a better postal employee of the month. I
You
want to
never
deliver
know.
mail.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to deliver the mail. Anyway, I said, I'm telling these people, stop fucking with the American people. Stop sending your henchmen after them. Stop sending your Jack Smiths after the American people. We the people have had enough. And you better get it through your heads because Joe Biden talks about F-18s and all this blustering. I advocate for peaceful solutions to all our problems. That's why I founded illegal advocacy. But everything it means may have an end. We the people are not to be trifled with. We the people are decent, of moral character, upstanding people for the most part. We have prisons and things that are relegated to other people too. I'm not a criminal. I trespassed to protest, to demonstrate peacefully. And these are the kind of people you're coming after and locking up. I have a better sense now of how they create the narrative about things like Waco. And now I really question, after experiencing my federal government firsthand, the greatest affront to that to me right now in my life is I'm thinking about everything I've ever learned in the history books because I've seen what the history books say about January 6th already. I'm disturbed by that.
Yeah, but it's
And if I
always the
wasn't,
winner who writes the history books.
and that right now they've written the history books. That's why I wrote a book. That's why I fired back. There has to be some, it's not quite Anne Frank's diary, okay? I get it, but there is a book. It's my book. I wrote the damn thing. And this is my story. And it's not just my story. This is the story of thousands of United States citizens that went through this. The book was endorsed by General Flynn, Laura Logan. I can't even begin to tell you. People are fed up. We will defend ourselves from tyranny. Don't make us, please. Nobody wants to be at a war. I don't want to be in a revolution. I don't want to fight back. I don't want to fight at all. I want to be left the fuck alone so I can pay my ridiculous taxes so you can fuck me out of my money in future generations and send it to the Ukraine and do what you do. I want to fight legislatively. I want to fight in the courts. But how am I supposed to fight in a corrupt process? How am I supposed to deal with corruption in our legislative branch? And I only get 2 choices. How am I supposed to deal with a process where I go before British accredited registered judge and a British accredited registered lawyer, and they don't do jack shit for you. And you got to basically build your own case in many cases. Now, thank God we have good ones at Condemned USA. We've been able to find them, round them up, and bring them in to the fold. This is the reality of where this United States is. I'm a peaceful man and I desire peace, but don't think I won't defend myself and my family from tyranny. Don't orchestrate terror campaigns against the United States citizens because we're good people. We want peace. We want to raise our children. But you can't forever keep doing this jackbutted thuggery. Thank God Donald Trump won this election. I don't know where we'd be had they have tried to steal this last one. I'm sure they did. They made every attempt and they stole some Senate seats and some House seats. And I guess the American public, including myself, seems to be okay with that. Maybe we figure that somehow we'll get these things flushed out. I desire constitutionally correct path, lit by a little bit of faith potentially along the way for some, and a whole lot of faith for me. They're welcome to take that sparingly or take keeping doses of it. God's got plenty to go around. But I will not stand for these things to happen in my country. I will fight them with everything I have. I will fight them with my last dollar. I'll fight them with my dying breath. I'll fight them in the court. I'll fight them in the legislature. And I'll fight them at the battlefield if that's what it takes. I'd rather fight them in the public square of truth and equity. Let's tell the truth. Everybody lay it out and be there. I will fight with everything I have to preserve this United States Constitution for myself, but more so for my children and future generations and everyone else. We all deserve that. And they deserve better than what we've allowed to happen here. So thankfully, we're able to fight in our courts and we're able to fight in our legislative branches, and we have a great fight. We've gained high ground. We've taken on momentum, and we're coming for our nation. We're going to rescue it from the clutches of evil, from the despair that the Democrats' operational malfeasance took place where they wanted to bring us communism, socialism, Marxist ideology. We, the people, told you no. Take that stuff and move on. Go somewhere where they have that already and live out your life happy under those policies and principles. Because over my cold, dead hands, dying body, and last breath will it happen here.
I hope that this will keep going because we have Donald Trump now back in office, and we the people won the election. They got him back in office, and there are now plans to pardon the J6 political prisoners. Can you tell us a little bit about how that will go and how this will look like, the pardoning process?
Yeah. I'm glad you recognize them as political prisoners because it could be nothing less than that at
Oh,
this
it
point.
is. The full definitions. This is political persecution. What happened to you? This is political. There are political prisoners, and there are a lot of fates in those Washington Gulag and in the other prisons all over the U.S. where probably also are some deaths and suicides happened, and nobody will talk about it because the government doesn't want to have bloody hands, but they have it. And maybe you have some informations about that there are so sad fates in this whole J6 crime. And it's not
Yeah.
from the people who are the bad people. No, the crime were committed by the government and by the authorities like FBI who persecuted you politically.
I guess who's good and who's bad is defined by the person that has the guns and authority, right? So,
Sadly.
maybe that needs to change. So I believe so because they've gone way astray from anything that's the expectation of American citizens. The United States citizens related to January 6th deserve full, unconditional, unwavering pardons and full restitution for what's happened to them. I don't care what crime or alleged crime or action that you saw them take at this point. The pounds of flesh and the abuse of the American people, the whisking away of our constitutional rights, the deprivation of rights under the color of authority, and many other actions all lead to the net sum of absolute and unconditional pardons. We, the people, deserve and will have pardons for the event of January 6th. Mark my words. You're going to see this change. You're going to see this begin investigated. You will see the investigators become the investigated. You will see the persecutors become the persecuted, and you will see the imprisoned go free, and those that did these deeds will go to prison. There will be some. There'll be many escape, but the message will be loud and clear from this administration that never again will there be abusive, tactical lawfare used in this country to destroy political opponents without grave consequences. And if it were up to me, I would give the ultimate price for treason for many of these people. They would pay it because they were willing to destroy Americans and let them die behind bars, 20-year sentences for absolute nonsense. People that weren't even present at the United States Capitol were doing 18 and 22 years. How is that? Because they stitched together a narrative, a woven lie, cornucopia of absolute malarkey. And this is what's taken place. They deserve this. They deserve to be made whole. They deserve for their names to be hung somewhere on the halls of freedom. They probably deserve medals at this point. I have lived these stories, these horrors, these pains with the parents and family members and sons and daughters. I've listened to crying children that are now 3 and 4 years old that have never met their father. They've never been to the prison to see him or his help. That's insane to me. And for what? Maybe a broken window? Or for what? An officer tried to hit you in the head with a baton and you put your hand up and blocked it instinctively? It's called self-preservation. It's not called assault. They didn't swing back and hit the officer. Now, in some cases, they pushed officers back and tried to do a little bit more damage. And that did happen. I'll own it. But it was because someone was dying and they were trying to get them to stop doing what they were doing. That's the tunnel. The scene they show you at the tunnel, like what I explained to you earlier, with the position and juxtaposition. The scene at the tunnel, they show you all the violence and the crazy and everybody's amped up. It's after you'd been spraying these people with all these noxious gases. It's after that they had attacked these people for quite some time. It was after they pushed this line of people over on top of Roseanne Boylan, who was drenched in CS gas and couldn't breathe. It was then after that that they were trying to render life-saving aid to Philip Anderson, Tommy Tatum, and there were other people in the crowd were trying to do CPR on Roseanne Boylan. And the officers were beating and shooting the gas and the spray and the noxious gases all over people. And they're trying to administer CPR as they're gasping for air in this cloud of this smoke. And here's a woman dying. And the people that stood up for her and said, whatever it takes, we're going to push them back because you have a right, a third-party defense of life. When abuse of power to the color of authority is happening. And it's like, hey, we'll sort it out later. Right now, we're going to beat you back to stop so we can save this person. And that those people are all in prison. They're all went to solitary confinement, were held and detained, and ordered sealed and gagged on these cases. They couldn't talk. Ronald Colton McAbee, decorated sheriff's officer, helped the officer. There's no doubt about it. And yet, what did they say? What did they tell you? They told you that he attacked the officer, assaulted him. That's not what he did. He was a human shield for the man. He got him back to the police line. The body cam footage clearly just depicts them communicating and him saying, hey, can I come inside? I'm hurt, my shoulder. He's asking the other officers if he can come inside. He thinks of them as friends and brethren he can trust. And they're saying no. I mean, these people are disgusting. And people say, well, it's not all of them. No, it's not all of them. But how many have come forward? Where's my whistleblowers? Not mine. Where's the whistleblowers for the American public to come and tell the truth? Where are the Capitol Police to come speak out? Where are the MPD? How many of you have come forward and spoken out? One man, Tariq Johnson's the only one I've ever seen. Well, Shane Lamont tried to, but they went ahead and charged him with crimes, said that he was coordinating with the Proud Boys. Well, yeah, he was. Good policing. So the Proud Boys came to town, they're going to march. BLM comes down, they're going to march, and they're looking for each other so they can have another street ball like before. So what's Enrique Tarrio do? He befriends Officer Shane Lamont and says, hey, I'll give you intel. I'll tell you where we're marching. His other people wanted to see him march, and it was more of a parade, right? I'll tell you where we're marching, and you make sure that crowd control, street diversions, where they open and close streets, make sure that it's like the snake game that we never meet.
Yeah.
And that's what Officer Shane Lamont did. And Then they're sending him to prison for that. This is insane. I mean, nothing about this is true. Nothing about it makes sense. And here we are today, still living this orchestrated lie. And American citizens, moreover, veterans who paid the ultimate price, put the ultimate sacrifice, wrote a blank check to this country. And it's shameful. It's a true shame that even I sit here today and these people are in jail. But just a few more days, we should have gone to get them right away, as soon as we knew the truth.
Yeah.
I didn't know right away, but I knew it within a year. And we'd had it out to the American public by and large by the end of 22. And they sat 2 more years. So I don't ever want to hear anyone give me any of that. Don't be waving those signs around and the stickers and doing the chants of where we go one, we go all, because apparently we do not. You ask a 2-time Bronze Star recipient, Jeff McKellop, who sits in FDC Dallas, if where we go one, we go all is a true statement. He's been there for 4 years. You ask Ronald Colton McAfee, sheriff's office deputy, been there for 4 years. I can go down the list. Decorated veterans, Jeremy Brown. Go on down the list. Decorated United States veterans, Special Forces, Special Command, Special Operations. Some really amazing people. And because they wouldn't turn and flip and work for the government, same offer I got, they're in prison. That can't happen. And that can continue to stand. We have to rectify that. That has to be sorted out. And it's on you, all of you, the American people, just as much as it's on me. But I've been doing my damn job. I've been fighting this for 4 years. I need to know where more of you are. You owe it, not to me, maybe not to them, but if you owe it to anyone, do you not owe it to future generations, your own bloodline, your own children? Do you think by duck and cover and say nothing and don't donate, don't get involved, stay low, that it's not going to come for you? We saw IRS, Lois Lerner, and the Tea Party. We saw this event. What do you think it's going to take for the American public to actually say no more? It's your time. It's time now. You back and support Donald Trump. You back and support the legislators who are doing what you want. Get loud, get vocal, make them know you're behind them, and make them know when you're against them. But you damn sure better be supporting United States veterans. You damn sure better supporting the people that stood up for you. And then I hear people sometimes say, oh, I want to pardon the violent ones. You know what? I want to find out who the 10 most violent are. Well, I actually know, but I want to put those people up front. I want to pardon them first. You know why? Because if shit hits the fan, they're the kind of men that are going to show up. So I want to take those guys. I want them to get the first pardons. The 10 most violent. They should be held a ceremony. I don't support assaulting law enforcement. I don't support violence. I don't support the looting or destruction. But the idea that we're going to say that this person who defended citizens in most of these cases, are these people need to not get a pardon? You have to look no further. I go back to the same argument. The Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a fair trial. You have a right to a speedy trial. You have a right to a jury of your peers. You have a right to process that's not biased and corrupted. None of those things happened in Washington, D.C. And none of those things happened. Donald Trump himself was saying, I can't get a fair trial here. It's a biased jury. The judge is tainted. No shit, Sherlock. We know. We've all been through it. You didn't make it through a trial like that. We all did. 1,600 Americans, mostly are sitting behind bars for what happened that day. And most of them didn't do anything violent. They're not even charged with violence. They put almost everybody behind bars. And then the appellate court overturned the decision, but after they had already served their sentence. And those that came after they got a sentence like that, they were scared to go to the appellate court because what happened? Or go back to the court and say, okay, give me a new sentence. Because they sentenced them to more jail time. They doubled down on it and they had to go back to appeal. So what are you going to do after that? Go appeal again and get more jail time? The beatings will continue until morale improves, was the mantra that the district judges, the United States court, laid at the American people's feet, more so bludgeoned them with. That can't stand. This can't stand. Got to be rectified. Got to be fixed. Pardons. Full and unconditional, unwavering, incalculable pardons. an absolute restitution for these people. And I want it done now. I want it done on day one. I don't want to hear any of this lily-livered, mealy-mouthed, sack of shit whining bullshit that we hear from the standard politicians, because that's not who we put in office. We put a man that has a set and a sack to step up and lead this country in office. I don't give a shit what the media say, and neither should he. That's why we hired Donald Trump. That's why we put that man in office, because he has a set. And when they shot the man, he stood up and yelled, fight, fight, fight. And I'm going to tell you, Donald Trump, if the narrative control were the same, if the election took place in November 21st, November 22nd, or of 22, excuse me, if the election took place November 20 of 21, of November of 2022, or November of 2023, you wouldn't have been president. Kamala Harris would have soundly beaten you. Sadly, whatever limp-wristed fool they stuck up there would have beaten you, because the country still believed at that time you led us into insurrection. Too many people believed it. Not enough people had the truth about January 6th. It was the greatest slight against you. It was the biggest orchestrated terror campaign that the deep state and the swamp issued against you and carried out. And they carried it out. We were just a byproduct. We were cannon fodder for them to get to you. So once upon a time, it was you between us, and then it became us between you. We fought back, evident and emblematic of the American spirit of who we are as a people. We courageously fought back against this narrative. We lifted that jackbooted thuggery off our necks, and from little help from many others, and we fought back. And then we were able to rescue and save you, because we were able to correct the record and tell the story. And we were able to get the truth in front of the American people. I don't remember Donald Trump making any documentaries. No disparity, sir, but let's be real. I don't remember any politicians making us any documentaries. I remember the American people making those documentaries. I remember myself, David Summerall, and others. I remember the films, The Thousand Days of Terror. I remember the films Bloody Hill that we still host it streaming for free. You can watch it anytime from anywhere in the world. BloodyHill.com. It's been translated into I don't know how many languages. Fantastic film. We did it in 2022. And people think, I've had people call me like, how did you know all that stuff was going to happen? Because we'd already seen it. We were investigating the evidence of January 6th, the things they wouldn't let you see, the CCTV footage, all the body cam footage. And people get hung up on this. When are they going to release the Capitol CCTV footage? Oh, the body cam footage from the MPD and the other officers that were there that day is far more damning, folks, far more damning. So, Vicky, I hope that you get this out to your audience and give them a real share, a real indication of what happened here, and you correct this record historically, because if not, it's only a matter of time till it's 60 feet from your front door and eventually your children's.
Yeah, we have that in the UK already with political prisoners. So it's a playbook where people all over the world has to suffer under it. And where can people find you? Where can people purchase your book and learn more about the truth around January 6th?
Yeah, thank you. So the book is available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle. It's everywhere. I mean, the book's easy. So it's 4 words: call it insurrection, comrade, because only a commie would call that an insurrection. And because it was a Marxist playbook bullshit deal. So call it Insurrection Comrade. It's available. Go to the website and find us at condemnedusa.com. Look at the legal work we've done. We've represented Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, the biggest trials in criminal history. And we're the only ones that beat seditious conspiracy. And in those trials, we were the only ones to beat it. They laughed at our fledgling legal advocacy, and here I am. I wasn't an author before this book. I wasn't a documentary filmmaker before Bloody Hill. I'm on my 4th documentary film now. And I wasn't a lot of things. I wasn't a lobbyist. I wasn't a spokesperson. I wasn't somebody doing any of this. I didn't want to do this. I was great, man. I was playing golf 5 days a week, getting drunk most of the time, and going to the lake afterward. Getting on my big boat and riding around the lake, going down to the restaurant, do it all over again the next day. And now I sit here. This is it. This is it. This is where I sit all day, every day, in this office. Marketing materials for legal advocacy, for an injustice that's unbearable. It could have been me. I was facing 23 years in prison. They hit me with the 1512 obstruction of Congress. And I'm sitting here doing this at 9 o'clock. My family's eating dinner. Kids went upstairs. I haven't seen anybody. My wife's been home for 2 hours. I've been here with you,
Thank you.
all of you. I've been doing it for 4 years, and you're welcome. And I'll be honest with you, Vicky. I mean, I appreciate independent journalism. I appreciate real journalists. I appreciate people that write for organizations that or institutions, whatever it is, publications, and do these things that aren't controlled opposition or controlled media or whatever. I get plenty of heat pieces. I do PBS. I'll do New York Times. I do them all the time. I mean, in the last month, New York Times, PBS, Washington Post. God knows who else has been through my house. So I come on down, let's go. I'll do it every time. I laugh. We record it. We love this is what they made of it. This is who they really are. They just can't help themselves. I'm sure the editors get a hold of it and go, "Oh, we can't be that honest. Go ahead and change it. We need to make it different." But I do it because if we don't fix this, it's coming for our children. It's already here. It's just a matter of whether we allow it to continue to metastasize in this country, or if we cut out this cancer now. I'm here to cut out the cancer.
Wow. This was an interview, though. And now you can understand how crazy it was in those last 4 years for those families, for the defendants of January 6th. And it's not over because they are still in prison. We're hoping that President Trump will stay to his words and pardon them ASAP. And yeah, the truth has to be told. There is no way that we can let it go into the history books as the worst day of the American people insurrection, because it was not this. It was planned by authorities. We know this now. We see the evidence. And I hope there will be justice for every single January 6th prisoner, because there are political prisoners and we have too much of them in the US, in the UK, Free Tommy, and also in Brazil. Thank you very much for listening and watching Battlefield USA. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, you've already served time for January 6th. Is that correct?
Yes, the government was kind enough to provide me a federal prison stay for demonstrations.
Did you just to be clear, did you burn down the Capitol on January 6th?
No, I actually would have been better off if I were an Antifa protester that would have burned $34,000 worth of federal property that was sentenced on the same day as me, who assaulted an officer and while on pretrial release, assaulted another officer and a civilian, and who got just probation and a small fine and went home.
You would have had a 95% chance of having your charges dropped. Correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct.
Did you assault anyone on January 6th?
Only the fabric of democracy, I hear.
Thank you. God bless you for your humor.